Good afternoon. My name is Hannah Colston, and I'm the new city manager for the city of Ramses, North Carolina. I'm here today to present my 2020 budget proposal for this upcoming year that needs to be approved by next month. So without further ado, let's get started. So just sort of a little recap on kind of where we stand as a city at the moment. As a whole, our total assessed property values over this last year have decreased by 25%. It's hard to say exactly why that is. A big portion of that is due to the recent economic downturn, which we have seen cuts in departmental spending due to over the last few years. And so that really hit us hard over this last year, really brought down quite a bit of our revenue streams. We've also seen are expecting a decline in sales taxes by about 2%. I think that has a lot to do with a decrease in spending from citizens. We've seen a lot of cuts in a lot of different areas, and sort of that economic hardship kind of taking shape in the form of reduced sales. Crime rates as a whole are up, particularly in the evening hours in Ramses. We see about 70% of our crime take place in the evening hours. That will be quite a big topic of discussion in terms of the proposals I like to incorporate in this upcoming budget. And then finally, just sort of going into this upcoming year, our remaining fund balance from last year was around $963,110. And so that was about I believe it was about 25% of our overall expenditures for 2019. And so just kind of a little bit of an overview here. So last year, our revenues were just above $4 million at about $4,012,945. Excuse me. Our expenditures were just that. It was a balanced budget. Again, ending fund balance, $963,000. And then so going into the 2020 budget, so we did see quite a bit of a decrease in our typical revenue streams at the end of 2019 going to this next year to be projected. But we also have seen a lot of areas where we do need to add some spending and add some expenditures. So our revenues are actually up a little bit just to cover some of those extra costs. I'll get into that a little bit more about how we're going to do that through the next year. Again, our expenditures are just under what our revenues will be. We'll have about $130 left over that will go back into the fund, and we'll end up with about $832,240.32 at the end of 2020, which is about 20% of our overall expenditures for the year. So first of all, a big issue that has been presented to me by the City Council is just a raise in our crime rates in the city. And of course, first and foremost, we want our residents to be safe. So something that has really been kind of on the docket is decreasing those crime rates, a few initiatives that we'd like to implement to get to that point. So we're going to start with adding an additional patrol car for $120,000. And so this patrol car, this cost includes the personnel costs, the maintenance, the car itself. And so this car will patrol during the evening hours, which, like I said previously, is when 70% of crime occurs in Ramses. And so overall, studies have shown an increase in police presence, not only as a deterrent for crime rates, it stops active crime, but it also just increases the sense of well-being and safety for our residents in Ramses, which is, of course, very important. And then I know another proposal that had been put forward in this same realm was that of adding a patrol car to every shift, which, of course, would be the ideal situation. We'd love to have police patrolling as often as possible. That would cost more money. It would be about $250,000, and we don't foresee that being possible for this budget cycle. But of course, I would love to re-examine that in the coming years as we shift to the next budget cycle, and as our property values begin to go back up, our revenues increase, and we sort of see that balance back out. And so sort of in conjunction with this reducing crime, it has been articulated that the youth need a way to harness their energy and to sort of create positive change and sort of reach their full potential to sort of deter potential for crime and just really kind of keep our youth happy and healthy. And so 2 things that we're going to do to address this, we'd like to extend park hours. So that will end up costing about $23,000, and that just gives the youth more access to our green space. We have so much beautiful green space here in Ramses, and it really needs to be taken advantage of. And then we will also be adding more after school hours and programs. And so that will cost about $54,000. And really, that's just a drop in the bucket if you think about it, of the way this will impact our community of children and how they'll go on to spread that positive change as well. So a couple other spending proposals that are a little bit smaller but worth mentioning that I'd like to incorporate in the budget. We'd like to partner with the county to improve property tax collection rates. So currently we're only at about 95% on collection rates, which is lower than most of our surrounding municipalities. So the county has agreed to partner with us to hire a dedicated tax collector for 2 months to sort of get those rates back up, really get to that 100% point. And so that would cost about $2,500 for the 2 months. Again, very small purchase or very small investment that will reap a lot of return. And then the next one is improving quality of healthcare for our government workers. As I mentioned before, due to the recent economic downturn in the economy, we've seen a lot of cuts. And I really feel that probably one of the bigger groups of individuals that has been hit by that is our government employees. And these are the people who keep the government running, who make sure our citizens have these services. And I think it's really important that we take care of these people. And so at the current state, we have to invest at least $10,000 just to keep up with the Affordable Care Act price increases. But on top of that, I'd like to add an additional $6,000 of investment to step up to the next healthcare package to get them a little bit better quality of care, lower their premiums, lower co-pays, just really take care of the people who are taking care of us, essentially. And so, of course, the big question remains is how are we going to pay for this? So we're going to do it in a few ways. So starting with increasing some revenues. I know this has been a point of contention for the council, but I really think it is due time to increase our millage rates. It's been 12 years since we have done that as a city, and this will absolutely make up for the 25% loss that we saw in current property valuation. And we can make this temporary. This doesn't have to be a fix that is permanent. So what I'm proposing is that we increase millage rates by 1.5 from 4.5 to 6. So overall, that would raise an additional $375,600, which would more than cover that loss from the property values, as well as some of our additional proposals we're incorporating into the budget. And then the next increase to revenue is an increase in water and sewer rates to finance the safety initiatives. And so this would increase our revenues in that area by about $200,000. I know the council had initially proposed increasing water rates with 35% and sewer by 25%, but I'm proposing that we do 37% and 27%. It's very slightly an increase to what had been initially discussed, and I really think that'll make up the difference and be able to cover the costs of that additional health care for our government workers, as well as our property tax collector. So I think that's really critical. And again, these don't have to be permanent. They can be temporary, dependent on the markets, dependent on the economy, our sales tax rates, our property value rates. These will all be reevaluated over the next few budget cycles just to make sure that we are not overcharging and we're not taking advantage of our residents. And so overall, in comparison to last year, as I showed before, this would increase our bottom line revenues by about $155,000. Which is huge, especially considering we are adding a few of these proposals and incorporating them this year. And so another way that we're going to be paying for a lot of this is decreasing some expenditures. So I am proposing a temporary 10% reduction in capital improvement projects. So specifically the water and sewer systems, road improvements, public works equipment. I really feel like that as it stands now, these projects are in good condition, and I'm not proposing that we halt any of the projects themselves, but rather slow them by about 10%. I think that's quite a minimal amount to ask, and I don't think that we'll see really any downside to that, at least over the course of the next year or two at the most. And again, dependent on future property values and the increased revenues in the future, we'll adjust these, we'll move this back up. And so finally, something that isn't going into the 2020 budget, but something that we should discuss and go moving forward is some capital improvement planning for ADA compliance. So currently we have 3 municipal buildings that are not ADA compliant, and we are required to make those changes over the next couple of years. And so that's a project that's going to cost about $450,030. So what I'm proposing, because we're already so tight in our revenues and expenditures, and we've already had to raise taxes in quite a few areas to cover some very basic things for this year, I want to make sure that we're not placing this, not to say burden, but this responsibility on our residents even further. So what I'm proposing is that we use some debt financing, and we do that in the form of general obligation bonds issued by the state of North Carolina. So these have proven to be very low risk, low interest. Also, they increase the intergenerational equity. We're not paying for all of these up front, and really the people, the residents who are going to be using them through the years are the ones who are going to be paying for them in the form of these taxes and things. So 90% of state and local capital improvement projects are financed in this way using debt. So I know this is another point of contention for the council, but I really believe that one, this is something that we obviously can't move forward without becoming ADA compliant, not only just for the integrity of being accepting of all of our citizens, but just because that is the legal requirement that is mandated of us. And then we will use some of these increased taxes. So once we get these additional expenditures out of the way for this year, we'll see that moving forward, we'll see increased revenues, and we'll use some of that to finance the payback of this bond. And then additionally, as I mentioned earlier, we'll have about $832,240 left over at the year end. So we can use that moving forward as a cushion to pay off any areas where we are maybe lacking in some funding. And so just in conclusion, really the safety improvements in our city are critical. It's become quite an issue, and it's something that can't go without being addressed. And so I think these improvements that we're making and adding a patrol car and increasing investment in our youth to harness their energy, I think these are all critical things that we will see drastic results in reduction of crime rates. The increasing property values is really what a lot of this will rely on moving forward. Of course, it's hard to say with how turbulent the market has been in recent years, but I truly believe that in improving the safety of our youth and our residents, as well as improving the quality of benefits that our government employees are receiving, will improve the overall quality of life in our city and raise the property values. Millage rates, that is something that is, I know is, again, a big point of contention for a lot of the council members, but I think it's not something that we can really debate on at this time. I think we need to move forward at least over the next 2 to 3 years and raise those rates, and then we can come back and revisit and lower them if needed. And then finally, of course, the ADA compliance. I know no one is a big fan of debt financing, but we are at a point now where this is something that needs to be done. And this is really the only way that we're going to be able to do it. And I believe that with these increases in some of our water and sewage rates, the millage rates, and some of these other taxes, that we will be able to pay this off and with very little interest, very little risk through that GO bond. And so that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to accept any questions, comments, recommendations. Thank you so much for your time.